Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. Hopefully, you all had a great Thanksgiving and holiday weekend. Bringing Week 13 to a close is the NFC battle with playoff implications for both teams as the 8-3 Minnesota Vikings visit the 9-2 Seattle Seahawks. The Vikings are trying to remain tied atop the NFC North with the 9-3 Green Bay Packers, and the Seahawks can tie the San Francisco 49ers, who sit atop the NFC West with a record of 10-2. The Seahawks come in as a 3-point home favorite, and the game total has been set at 50 points. Before I unpack this game, I want to share the numbers that are fantasy relevant to the Showdown contest itself. Up to and including the 5 Showdown contests Sunday afternoon and the New England-Houston Showdown contest last night, there have been a total of 94 Showdown contests. These Showdown contests have an average winning score of 132.01. The average winning captain score is 42.16. Since the captain's position represents 32% of the average winning score, I focus a lot of attention to the captain's position itself. With that being said, the captain's position breaks down as follows, and this is through the 94 contests. The underdog running back has been in the captain's position more than any other position for the winning lineup 20 times for 21%. The favorite quarterback, 17 times for 18%. The favorite wide receiver has been the captain in the winning lineup 16 times for 17%. The underdog wide receiver, 12 times for 13%. The favored running back has been the captain for the winning lineup 11 times for 12%. The underdog quarterback has been the captain for the winning lineup 6 times for 6%. And the favored defensive special team has been the captain for the winning lineup 6 times for 6%. The underdog kicker has been the captain for the winning lineup 2 times for 2%. The favored tight end has been the captain for the winning lineup 2 times for 2%. Underdog tight end has been the captain for the winning lineup 1 time for 1%. And the underdog defense special teams has been the captain for the winning lineup 1 time for 1%. Now, I also combine these positions just by position, whether they were the underdog or the favorite, and it breaks down as follows. Running backs have appeared in the captain's position for the winning lineup more than any other position, 31 times for 33%. That's 1/3. Wide receivers are next, 28 times for 30%. Quarterbacks, 23 times for 24%. All others represent 12 times for 13%. The overall straight-up record for the captain, their teams, whoever the winning captain is, their team's straight-up record is 65 wins and 29 losses, which is 69%. So the captain is from the winning team 69% of the time. And I broke that down by position. Running backs are 23-8, which is 74%. Wide receivers 16-12, 57%. Quarterbacks 16-7 for 70%. Now, do these numbers unlock the winning showdown lineup for tonight's Vikings-Seahawks game? Absolutely not. But what it does do is gives us an edge, which in the end is all we're looking for. Some of the main takeaways from these numbers is that the underdog running backs appear in the captain's position more than any other position, 1/5 of the time, 20%. Running backs combined represent 1/3 of the winning lineups. The captain for the winning lineups comes from the winning team 69% of the time. Those are just some of the things that I use as a part of my overall process when I'm building lineups. And my process also includes, first, I take a stand. Who do I think will win? How are they going to win the game? What is the path to victory? The passing game, the running game? Then who are the players that support this game theory? And out of that, I identify a few players who I feel have a path to be the highest scoring, which would make them the likely captains, and then I build my lineup around them and correlate other players to make sense of the lineup in whole. And you also have to factor in the other team. What are they going to do if they're behind? How are they going to try to remain in the game? What does this cause other players to be phased out? All those things are correlated when I build my lineups. In tonight's game, there are 2 players that garner the top ownership in the Showdown's captain spot. And those are going to be running back Dalvin Cook for Minnesota and quarterback Russel Wilson for Seattle. The defensive strengths of both these teams is their running defense. Minnesota's allowing 94.2 yards per game and have only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns, and that's 5th overall. And Seattle's allowing 101.5 yards per game. They've allowed 12 rushing touchdowns, however, which is 9th overall. In comparison, the weakness of these teams' defenses lies in their pass defense. Minnesota's allowing 244 yards per game, and they've allowed 19 passing touchdowns. Seattle's allowing 268.7 yards per game, and they've allowed 13 passing touchdowns. I'm leaning towards this game being more of a shootout, as both these quarterbacks are in the top 3 in overall quarterback rating. Kirk Cousins is at the top with a 70.6% completion percentage and a quarterback rating of 114.8, which is better than any of the other quarterbacks in the NFL. Russel Wilson's third with a quarterback rating of 112.1 and a 67.3 completion percentage. So these are 2 really efficient quarterbacks. Focusing on the passing game and fading the running game will be somewhat contrarian, risky, but contrarian. And I say risky because both coaches will try to get their running backs involved in this game early, which eliminates your exposure to the passing game early. These are two highly efficient offenses, as I mentioned, being led by 2 of the top 3 efficient quarterbacks. Cook will cost you $17,700 in the captain's spot for Draftkings and really handcuffs the rest of your lineup. Wilson's going to cost you $16,200 in the captain spot. And although I'm interested in the passing games, I want to focus on other pieces so I can have a more balanced lineup. And this also allows me to get exposure to both quarterbacks in my lineup. I'll give the edge to Seattle tonight, being at home, slight favorite. Monday night at home, Seattle's a tough place to play. And this is the build that I'm working on, and I'll go over with you guys how I got there. And again, the purpose of this video is to show you my process and how I use that process to correlate and build my lineups that I'm going to use. In my captain spot, I'm going to use DK Metcalf. He's 11,400. This is a matchup nightmare for Minnesota. A really big receiver. There'll be a lot of interest going to Tyler Lockett. Lockett has been banged up lately. We can look right here and see that. Here we go. Shin and illness, does not have an injury status for Monday's game, but he has been banged up the last few weeks. Despite practicing on a limited basis just once on Thursday and Friday, Lockett is set to play Monday against the Vikings in what figures to be a solid matchup for fantasy purpose. In his last game, he saw season lows of 1 reception and 2 targets. And that was another matchup that was favorable. But I like Metcalf. There's a big savings with him in the lineup and allows me to get to exposure for other players that I want to have. In the flex, I'm going to have Russel Wilson. One of the rules that I use when I'm building these lineup is if I use a wide receiver in that captain spot, I want his quarterback in the flex spot. I mean, how is he going to get there? How's that wide receiver going to get there? The only way he's going to get there is the quarterback throwing him the ball. Now, if I want to use the quarterback in the captain spot, what I'm virtually saying is the quarterback's going to go off scoring, and he's going to spread the ball around to different targets. In this scenario, I'm saying that Metcalf is going to have a big game and be one of Wilson's main targets, but outscore Wilson. Next, I'm going to use another target for Russell Wilson, and that is Hollister, the tight end. Minnesota's number 22 coming in versus the tight end. He scored 20 fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 games. I really like him, and you can afford him at 4,800. Fits in with the passing game, and another target for Wilson. Next, I'm going to use Kirk Cousins, in the flex spot. Now Cousins has a history of being horrible in primetime games, but he's been very efficient this year, and as I said, he's leading the NFL in quarterback rating. Um, I really like him, as I feel like Cousins is actually a pivot off of Dalvin Cook, and I want some exposure to him. If I think that this game totals 50, so I'm leaning towards it being high scoring, 27, 20, 23, 27, 24 or higher. And if it shoots out, it's going to be through the passing game. And the weaknesses of these teams, as I previously talked about, is their pass defense. For Cousins, I'm going to use Irv Smith. He's cheaper than Rudolph, significantly cheaper, $3,000 cheaper. He actually in the last game ran more routes than Rudolph. He ran 32 routes. Rudolph only ran 27. Thielen being ruled out, those targets have to go somewhere, and they spread them out. He also had him and Rudolph both had 80% snap percentage in that last game. So I really like Irv Smith as a pivot off the more expensive Rudolph. Cousins, going back to before he was in Minnesota and Washington, he likes to go to his tight ends. They use double tight end set, and Irv Smith will get his share of targets in this game. And last, I'm going to go and I'm going to grab Stephon Diggs. He has a phenomenal matchup against Trey Flowers tonight. He hasn't really had that real big game, but I think he'll do enough. I'm going to use Metcalf in the captain spot. It allows me to do this build with Diggs up there. I wouldn't be able to do this. I'd have to either cut out Hollister or Smith. And I really like this. I don't have any field goal kickers in here, which I usually have at least one or one of the defense special teams. And I try to only use one of those four, at the most two. But these teams are very efficient in the red zone and scoring. So I don't have exposure to that, and I believe that all these players will outscore a field goal kicker tonight. So I only left 600 on the table, and I seen a chart that said that the average winning lineups leaving just over $1,000 on the table. So it's not a bad thing to leave money on the table. So this is one of my main builds that I will have this in some lineups. Put a lot of research into this. I feel like there's Metcalf and Diggs are definitely two really big mismatches for both teams. And as you notice, I've faded Dalvin Cook. I know it's very risky, but this is the build that I like. And see what Cook and there's no one. I mean, I could potentially take out. I could take out Diggs. No, that still wouldn't get me to Cook. But I got to get over my FOMO, fear of missing out on Cook. And if he has a mediocre game, 94 yards, a touchdown, couple receptions, but the game is really high scoring and blows out, then I'm okay with fading him. So, because if you do use him in the captain spot, it does handcuff you. You won't get this build with him in the captain spot. I can assure you that. Then it's hard to get both quarterbacks. And if you had him in the captain spot, you probably really wouldn't want Cousins in the flex. And another thing about Cook is if I'm going to use him, if I think he's going to absolutely smash, which I'll build a couple lineups and have him in the captain spot. I don't mass multi-entry, which I'll get into again here in a minute with my optimizer. And I don't have anything against anybody that does. It just makes total sense. And if I'm ever in the position to do it, I'll do it. But I build a few manual lineups, and I spread them across different contests. I did really well last night in the New England-Houston game. But getting back to this game, Cook, if I think he's going to smash, I'm going to have him in the captain spot. I'm not going to pay the 11-8 for him in the flex spot. If It's for me, it's all or nothing with a player like that. If he's going to smash, I'm going to put him up there, and I'm going to build around it another way. But for me, I want a piece of the passing game in the captain spot to be a little bit different. This is a large GPP type entry. You got to be contrarian, got to find a way to be different, and this is my way of being different tonight. Again, this video isn't designed to give you picks for you to run out and put this in a lineup or in a contest. If you do, that's fine. That's on you. If we win, we'll be splitting, and I'd rather have something than nothing. So, as I always do, I use an optimizer from a paid site that I have, and I take the players that I'm interested in. I set the minimum, maximum exposures, how much exposure that I want for each player. I pick 4 or 5 captains with different, different theories. I mean, if Minnesota comes out and smashes, they're going to lean on their running game. Or if Seattle comes out and smashes, they could lean on their running game. Or if this game shoots out and it's up and down the field, like my last build that I showed you. So I set the exposures to reflect different game theories in 4 or 5 different captains. And then I set up a couple rules. As I mentioned earlier, if I have a quarterback in my captain spot, I want at least 2 targets in the flex. If I have a wide receiver in the captain, I want the quarterback in the flex. I try to only use one of the 4 between the 2 defensive special teams and 2 field goal kickers, at the most 2. Field goal kickers have the higher floor. I tend to lean towards home field goal kickers, or at least the favored field goal kicker, because their team has a higher implied total, which means they're projected to score more points, and it just makes sense to take the kicker from the team who's going to score more points. And losing teams often get into the position where field goals are irrelevant, and they have to start going for it no matter what to make up some ground in the game. So that's my process with my optimizer. I set it for 150 lineups. Sometimes it spits out 150 on the dot, and that tells me that either there were exactly 150 lineups that could be created, or there might be a potentially 400 or 500 different lineups using the players that I like. And I want to see the different randomizations of the players that I'm interested in. Manually building, I'm not going to see that. And I might enter the 20 entry quarter, with just $5, 20 entries. I might enter the 20 entry $1, and this allows me to see the different randomizations and go to it and import lineups, the ones that I like. And sometimes I'll import and say, well, I like that, and I'll move a few things around and enter that way. That's burned me a few times, though, trying to put my own spin on it. But today I did that, and the optimizer has set it for 150, and the optimizer gave me 141 out of the requested 150. So the players I like with the rules I had, it was able to generate 141 different randomizations of those players. And as I always do, I give you guys my the very first one, and this was the build that it gave me. It had Kirk Cousins. Now remember, these players are going to be a reflection of what I've already talked about, how I think the game's going to go, the different exposures and things like that. Kirk Cousins in the captain. Flex, it had a kicker, Jason Myers for Seattle. Olabi Johnson. This is a very interesting play. He's almost a free spot tonight. He's actually the number 2 target. In their game last week, he had 9 targets. Thielen's out. He's the number 2 wide receiver to Stephon Diggs. And for 2,600, he's virtually a free spot. It just makes a lot of sense to have him in the lineup. It allows you to have different builds spend up in different areas too. Next, it has Chris Carson. which I'm really not a big fan of Carson tonight. Minnesota, the way to beat them is through the air. They're very stingy versus the run game. Chris Carson last week was basically phased out a little bit due to the game that Rashad Penny had. He's put the ball on the ground, and a lot of times Carroll loses his patience with that, and they'll put him on the sidelines. In his game last week, actually, let's see this game long. His last game, he had 8 rushes for 26 yards and 4 receptions for 31 yards for 9 fantasy points. And then if you go down here to Penny in that game, so Carroll will go with the hot hand too. And Carroll has said that they're going to try to get him more involved. Now, Pete Carroll really can't be trusted, so I wouldn't put a lot of faith in his coach speak. Rashad Penny could see 2 touches tonight. So keep that in mind. He's not known to tell the truth, but just wanted to show you the difference in that game last week. Penny had 14 carries for 129 yards and a touchdown, and he had 1 target in the passing game. So they definitely phased Carson out that last game, which concerns me. If they do that in this game, I don't really want exposure to him at $8,400. The next flex was Stephon Diggs. So you got Cousins in the captain, matched up with 2 of his targets, and the Seattle field goal kicker. And last was Russell Wilson. So there you go. And this one actually left $1,100 on the table, which is contrarian. I kind of like it, as I said. I don't like the Chris Carson. So if I wanted to take that out, I could I like Metcalf, and that would give me a target with Russell Wilson, and that would leave $1,900. But this was what the optimizer gave me, and it's a very interesting lineup. Now Cousins has to do a lot to get there in the captain's spot. He needs Johnson in this build. He needs Johnson and Diggs to have big games, but not bigger than him. And so in Draftkings, it takes a lot for the quarterback to get there in the captain's spot. But this is an interesting lineup. I'll have this in something. I do trust the optimizer, the way I set it up. And I don't see Wilson and Carson having really big games. And as I mentioned, I'm really scared about or concerned with Rashad Penny sitting there in running back committees. I don't like those at all. But there you go. That's 1,100. So this will be it'll be contrarian compared to Cook and Wilson and Lockett and those guys in the captain spot. But I didn't really like that one because of Carson. And I want to show you an example of what a Dalvin Cook lineup looked like from the optimizer. And this was the first Dalvin Cook lineup that it gave me. It had Dalvin Cook. Let's get him out of the flex. It had Dalvin Cook in the captain, which is 17,700. Now that's not the highest we've seen in the last few weeks, but it does limit you because these other players are priced up. It had Irv Smith in the flex, Olabi Johnson, in the flex, and Stephon Diggs. So this is pretty much a Minnesota onslaught. It had Russell Wilson, and then it had the field goal kicker for Seattle. The thing I don't like about this is if Dalvin Cook's going off and all these players are going off, Russell Wilson will probably be involved. But I don't know that Jason Myers is going to be so involved in the scoring. If these players are doing a lot and there's a lot going on and a lot of scoring going on, and they somehow build a lead and they start leaning on Cook, this to me this lineup just doesn't correlate that well. But this was the first Dalvin Cook lineup that it gave me. It left 1,700 on the table, which is interesting. I would probably, if I was going to have Cook there in that scenario, I would probably go back to maybe trying to get, if you got to see Tyler Lockett, you could have 5,700. And you could actually have, you could have the field goal kicker. But again, I don't feel like that correlates that well. You could have Hollister, Josh Gordon. So you could go that way and leave 900 on the table. And that's what I do with a lot of my randomized lineups. You know, I just want to see the different randomizations of the players that I like. And again, I have nothing against anybody that can me. That just makes total sense. And one day I will be in the position to do that. I need to take one of these down to put myself in that position. I've never won one of the Showdown contests outright. I've cashed in several. I've been up there several times. Did very well last night. If you see the Cowboy Fan 215 in a contest, that's me. That's how I do my builds and utilize my optimizer. So this about brings the showdown between the Vikings and Seattle to a close. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I encourage you to please post any opinions or comments that you may have below. Please share this video, like it, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that notification bell. My subscribers have been trending upwards. I had a nice uptick in subscribers over the holiday weekend, and viewers have really went up. So if you're not already a subscriber, please do so. And hit that notification bell so you get notified when my next video posts. I will be posting a recap of Week 13 video tomorrow, and then get back to my regular format, which I got away from because of the holiday weekend, where I break down each position in its own separate video and put it all together on Saturday and do some lineup buildings. So you can also follow me on Twitter at winningabout. Don't forget to check the injury reports for any games. Tonight's injury report will be out no later than 7 o'clock. The game kicks off at 8:15, so it'll actually be out at 6:45. Always check that. Even if someone doesn't have a questionable tag or a probable tag, something happens in warm-ups, they get sick. A few weeks ago, Robert Woods for the Rams was a late scratch, and you want to be aware of that before you hit that submit button on your lineups and you get stuck with a big fat zero. And it's Showdown, any contest you don't want a zero, but Showdown, when you only have 6 positions, a zero is not good. So again, I'll be back tomorrow. Good luck tonight. My name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports. Thanks again.